Hello, and welcome to episode 42 of the Carry On with Carrie podcast. Today, I am excited to introduce you to Fola Veritas. She has worked in the mental health and addictions industry for over 11 years. Fola has dedicated herself to promoting wellness through the integration of both traditional healing methods and modern scientific knowledge. Her authentic, compassionate, and heart-centered approach when working with others supports them as they move through their transformations. So she was merging her personal experiences. She's merged them with her certifications as a Registered Psychiatric Nurse, Shamanic Practitioner, Reiki Master Teacher, Spiritual Emergence Coach, and Psychedelic Integration Therapist. She instills a sense of hope in each person through the power of various therapeutic and healing modalities, with a touch of intuitive guidance. Her hope is to continue to bridge the gap between spirituality and mental health, while creating a sense of connection and belonging for those that she supports. And I'm so glad to have her here. I got some training with her this last weekend for Reiki level 1. And I can tell you she definitely knows her stuff. There's a sense of just knowing when you're around her. And I hope you really get a lot out of this episode, which I know you will. So without further ado, now it's time to talk. Hello, good morning, Fola. How are you?
Hi, Carrie. Yeah, I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm good.
Yeah.
It's kind of a gray day out there today, but so I wore my sunshine shirt. I wasn't going to do
Nice.
video today, but here we go. So yeah,
Going with the flow.
that's right. So yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. I was lucky enough to be introduced to you through a friend, Sherry Lynn Shaw, and I am really, really interested and intrigued to hear about your perspective on mental health and kind of the journey that you've made from beginning to where you're at right now. And it's quite an evolution from what I've seen. So can you give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. It's a long story short, hey. So yeah, I guess since I was young, I definitely had this draw to both spirituality and also mental health. When I was in, I want to say it was grade 11, grade 9 or 11, maybe it was grade 11. We had gone to see, my mom actually had taken me to go see the movie A Beautiful Mind.
Ah, yes,
Whatever
great movie.
reason. That's like my favorite movie of all time. And I mean, it makes sense. Like I remember watching it and just being like, wow, like mental health, psychiatry, there's something about it that I think can be really beneficial and transformative for folks. And so that kind of led me to my interest in psychiatry.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was like, I know I'm going to work in mental health. I know I'm going to be in the community, like supporting people who are in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, like years of study, I guess, and finding my path, I ended up going into psychiatric nursing. Really like by chance. Like I remember the first year as we were in our first clinical placement, I'm like, how the heck did I get here? Like,
Right.
what? I'm not a psych nurse. I'm not a nursey type person. And yet there I was. And my first my last clinical placement and my first job was, so that's where I spent a lot of my time, was a community, like urgent intensive care, kind of like going out and working alongside first responders. I spent a lot of time working next to police, like the Emergence Police and RCMP.
Okay.
And it was around that time that I had what I would identify as a spiritual emergence, and however people want to call it, spiritual awakening, Stan Groff, and a lot of these like kind of like forward thinking mental health professionals who tend to blend in a lot of spiritual practice would call them like spiritual emergence or spiritual emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was just like a very profound period of my life where I was still going to work. Like I was able to function. I just like come back from like mat leave with my kid. And things just were like so bizarre. I didn't really know what was happening. It kind of was sparked by this like encounter with this person who just like unlocked something inside me and like my energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just became so much more aware of what like was happening in the world, the universe, the energetic kind of stream. So that led me down the spiritual path. That's how I met Sherilyn, through like a Reiki class and all the
Right.
different other things that have come along my journey.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'd had a definite like a pull towards the psychedelic stream, like, you know, altered states of consciousness and all that good stuff. And so I could see it kind of merging, and like there, you know, I found myself like studying with a lot of these kind of forward thinkers, like I said, who were coming with this place of, well, what if like mental health is something else?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is really deep depression, and antidepressants help me to like get out of that.
Right.
And yet I also recognized kind of like the root cause of it then was this like dark night of the soul. Like I didn't really feel like I was doing what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, I left my family. I was living in Saskatoon,
Oh,
going to school.
Saskatoon. Love
So
Saskatoon.
yeah, from like the
Yeah.
desert. I
Yeah.
used to live overseas. So it was like
Oh,
quite a
okay.
drastic change.
Yes.
And here I was like, what am I doing? It's like -40. I'm in
Mhm.
school all the time, living in res. I don't really see anyone that I know from my past. And I went like really, really dark. And so in like retrospect, I could see it as this like dark night of the soul, kind of this like aligning with soul purpose, you know, finding joy in life, even when things seem really kind of shitty.
Yeah.
Medications help me to like get out. So, you know, there's a part that's could be chemical and biological, obviously, like this is psychiatry. And yet there's also this idea that the soul is kind of like screaming for life to be different. When I went through this spiritual emergence and I started to go out, you know, here I am assessing people in their homes, and they're telling me things that like before I would have labeled as like, oh, okay, psychosis or this is bipolar disorder or whatever. It's like,
Right.
oh, like, well, I've kind of experienced some of that stuff now. Like angels, like, yeah, angels do come and talk
Mm-hmm.
to you, you know, like if you're open to seeing them or hearing them. And that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really mean like that's a bad thing. You know, there's obviously challenges when you're experiencing so much of this like energetic shift, but then you can't function, you know, all of a sudden maybe the paranoia comes so much so in your life that you think people are out to harm you, and you try to do things to protect yourself, like carry weapons or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like then, you know, maybe someone needs to step in and make sure that things kind of can balance out.
Right.
But for the most part, I feel like most people do have some insight, have most of the judgment that they need. You know, those are kind of criteria that we would look for. And then what's the support that could come in place? And I think the huge part for me that kind of started to open was like this sort of blending of the nursing world and psychiatry, and also the cure, empathetic listening, and like just having compassion for people's experiences
Mm-hmm.
instead of labeling them as bad or wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And so that kind of like really led me to, I guess, stepping away more and more, or at least showing up as myself. And, you know, my colleagues would be like, oh, Fola, like there's this one, you know, client that probably you'd be great for. Because
Mm-hmm.
there would be like really high, like spiritual tones, or people would be like, this is like a weird situation.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, like that's kind of normal in different cultures, or, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and yeah, so that's kind of where it led me. And so now I like really tune into how can we support and bring balance and joy and like align with our personal truth in life through different magical practices and altered state experiences. Because I found plant medicines to be very healing, you know, like a part of my journey through trauma.
Okay.
I mean, working in psychiatry, I'm sure you can imagine there'd be some interesting
Yes.
experiences.
Yeah.
Working alongside police.
Yes.
It definitely led to some chaos.
Can you give us a little bit of background about how that was when you were working with the police, and what kind of things that really they're struggling with, just to bring some awareness to that?
The police,
Yeah.
you mean, or the clients?
Well, I guess the clients, like if you how did you deal with them one-to-one and help with their experiences, or what was your involvement with the RCMP?
Yeah. So we would get referrals through either the police themselves, maybe like members out in the community were out doing like a call. And then they kind of have this tinge of like, oh, there might be some addiction issues or mental health concerns here. They refer it to our team. Or we'd get calls from like family members, loved ones in the community or other community members. And they're like, yeah, let this person, maybe they call it crisis team. It's like, something needs to happen. That person needs to connect with a therapist or see a psychiatrist for some extra support.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it was kind of this like bridging between like not really having any support or not being connected to services, and then doing an assessment, conversations, doing different types of follow-up with folks or
Right.
their like healthcare providers or whoever else might be kind of involved. And then, yeah, just like bridging them and kind of closing the gap to whatever it is that they might need in terms of resources. Sometimes though, we would take people to hospital,
Right.
like against their will for the most part. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
why the police have the authority to do that. But, that was kind of like the last resort. Like our main goal was the right connections that,
Yeah.
we hopefully want and kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm. How to support them so you would give them the resources and help support them in that way first. Yeah.
Yeah, and just really like normalizing, I'd say normalizing what people were going through
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to different mental health concerns, whether it's depression or anxiety or any type of sort of like psychotic or, perceptual changes in their awareness. I think that's a huge part. So like, podcasts like this even, just people hear it and they're like, oh, like that's okay. It's okay that I experience, like for me, it's like hearing voices is one that, not so much in Canada, but like in the States, I ended up connecting with a group called Hearing Voices. I think America is maybe just what they kind of
Right.
go by their term. And they're like a peer-led group, and they're just like, hearing voices is not this horrible thing. Like,
Right.
and to me, from a spiritual, like the shamanic lens of going beyond the veil, spirit speaks to us in different ways. And many times people can't really define what it is that's coming through. Sometimes the inner voice can be so loud, whether it's the intuitive voice in the womb or whatever, like, or the ego mind that wants to keep us small and like in resistance to life's changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's all these different factors, but like I started talking more with folks who are like normalizing and reducing the stigma. And I think that's really, really great. Like people can still go on with their lives, even though someone's diagnosed them with like schizoaffective disorder.
Right.
Which before, like for when still, I feel like it can definitely put like limits. People either limit themselves because of a diagnosis, or they let others like impose their will and control on them and
Mm-hmm.
say they can't do certain things, where in actuality it's like you just learn how to go about life with what you have. And I think that too starts to lead to more empowerment.
Right. Yo, I love that. Actually, I just got all the chills. I say that a few times an episode, but the fact that you can um, say it in a way that, because that's anytime I've gone through a dark period or anything like that, when somebody actually just puts it out there, like, it's okay that you're feeling this way. You're not the only one who's feeling this way. And sometimes you take it like, I know. And then it can be hard to, even that can be a resistance. But the more it's talked about, like you said, that puts you in the present, and it puts you in the moment of knowing, okay, well, I'm not so rare. There's lots of other people that it's okay to have had that moment, or that psychotic break even, or any of the above, right?
Yeah, and it's simple. I think, like, because those are probably like the rare occurrences when we're talking about these like really, really like formal quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
diagnoses.
Right.
But like for the most part, like we all have struggles, like of just, some days not wanting to get out of bed or not feeling motivated or just feeling really like bummed out, whatever the case might be. And what I find is when I like feel that, usually what I'll do is like I'll make a video, like whether it's on YouTube or
Yeah.
Instagram or something. It's just like, oh, and I feel the energy through, and then I'm like amazed constantly at like how many people are like, that's how I'm feeling right now.
Right.
And it's like, oh, like so even though it requires like a huge piece of like vulnerability. And I'm not at all saying I'm like openly vulnerable about everything, because there's definitely certain areas in my life that still it's like a struggle for me.
And that's
And
okay.
yet,
You're allowed to have those things that are just sacred to you as well, right?
yes,
And when they're
thank you.
ready to come
Yeah,
out, they'll come out if they need to be.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's something about that sharing and hearing other people's experiences that like aligns us and shows our like humanness, and how there's like this bigger collective field that we all are kind of experiencing together.
And I feel that right now, especially, I've noticed, and I mean, when you start kind of going down that path and trusting your intuition and just allowing yourself to kind of move through each moment, because that's all we got is this moment. But the trickle effect that happens, or no, the trickle effect, the ripple effect,
Oh,
same
ripple.
thing.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
The trickle
It's trickle in
effect.
this movement.
I like to
Yeah.
make up my own little. So the ripple effect, though, that happens from like even just, I say this all the time, how one person leads, like when I got going on this, it's I didn't know that it would evolve to what it has right now, and how many people and like-minded people that I've met, and how willing people are to share. And I find that, so if each person just took that one little step, because, you always say, well, what can I do? How can I make a difference? It's just one little thing at a time that does make the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't need to be huge. I think
No.
that's so much in our like hustle culture. Since we're young, like be the best, get the highest grade, like do the most work. It's like, no, it could be as simple as just a conversation or a smile or like showing up in a place, like
It's
but
always
your
the simple
energy can
things in the
add.
end, I think.
Yeah, totally.
So so I'm excited to hear about what you do with magic and shamanic practitioning. What are I know you're a Reiki master, and you are an instructor and all that stuff. So I'd love to hear a bit about your journey in that field.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I mean, maybe I'm biased because I teach Reiki now. But like when I took Reiki, like that level 1, I just was curious. Like I'd had a Reiki session done to myself by someone, and I was just kind of like, whoa, like what is this?
Yeah.
Never really heard of it. It was kind of the beginning of my whole experience in life. And so I took the level 1, and yeah, I guess many years later, here we are. Even the teaching, I remember like, as level 1, 2, 3 came, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to teach Reiki. That's ridiculous. Like,
Right.
I don't really feel like I'm a Reiki, but like, I was a Reiki teacher, and I'm like, oh wow, you're like a Reiki practitioner. Me, I'm very much like, ooh, like here, what's the shiny thing here? And yet here I am, because I feel like Reiki can be such a powerful tool to like opening people's awareness to energy. It gives like a language to what is energy, how do you perceive it, what do different cultures say about it, and then how do we start to like utilize that to bring balance to our minds and our body and our heart, to our soul, and like align us again with truth that is meant for us on our path. And so that kind of was like the starting point. I mean, like obviously I would say too, like the plant medicines, psychedelics kind of played a role within all of that. Though I wouldn't really say that was like the primary focus for me. Now, though, that definitely is something that, the past like few years, it's like, okay, there's benefit here, because that too, I find can really like open people when people tend to be maybe a bit closed off. They're kind of like scared. They don't know which steps to take, or not really sure about how like the world operates, their place within it. Like psychedelics and plant medicines can really like open that. It expands our consciousness, and that's necessary in order for us to, I guess, experience life. So those two are kind of like the primary like foundations, is how I would describe it. And then the shamanic work really was like for me in my own personal journey, and that actually came about because of my interest in the psychedelics. It's just like a fluke experience. I thought I was signing up for a psychedelic course, and it ended up being this completely different thing. It was really kind of weird. But
Meant to
clearly
be.
that's what my soul was calling me to. And so it's like a self-development, self-healing journey. And it's just kind of evolved into really tapping into my ancestral roots, healing my like past trauma and life experiences, like a lot of childhood, parent-child relationship stuff.
Right.
And shamanic work or any of these like kind of indigenous sort of teachings, they really do help us through like intergenerational healing. So,
Yes.
we say it heals like those 8 generations back and forward. So through our family line with kids and
Oh,
grandkids and
okay.
so forth. So
I've
they're
never
that
heard the
talking about a
forward part
ripple.
before. Yeah, I've never heard
Yeah.
that part before. It makes, okay,
Yeah. Like
interesting.
even if we don't have kids, like it's
It's,
gonna ripple out
yeah,
into the world.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's gonna, yeah, absolutely. Wow, this is all, and yeah, sorry, I kind of interrupted you there, and you were on a
Oh, that's
roll, and
okay.
I love hearing what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh no, it was just like I guess it's everything started with self curiosity to now, I kind of identify myself at this point, I make videos on YouTube and I
Right.
just really like want to share this knowledge and understanding that's kind of like been gifted or come to me in different ways through experience. And I hope that again, by sharing story and talking about these things that for many people, talking about magic, talking about ritual, talking about like altered states of consciousness, even talking about mental health, like in the shadow is how I want to say, like any of those dark pieces that, we kind of like, oh, we can't really talk about this. It's gonna, we're usually told not to cry or to just keep the anger inside or whatever.
Hmm.
It's like, I feel like that's really my focus is like bridging that gap again by showing both the light and the dark aspects. And
Right.
to me, altered states, magic through the different kind of practices that I engage in and teachings that I have like explored, I feel like that's a benefit
Hmm.
because
And
it again it aligns us with our truth and
yeah,
lets us be who we are.
do you find that you kind of merge your psychiatric nursing background with this, and it kind of it gives you a little bit more background, and because there's people that magic and they're still not quite open to that side of
Mhm.
things for modalities and don't understand it. So yeah, how did you find those two things merged, those two practices merged together?
Yeah, I feel as though, I think of this one occult writer, Israel Regardie. I really like his material because he would talk about like the benefits that will come when psychology or psychoanalytical kind of processes will merge with magic and the different magical practices that various like magic groups have shared over the years. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening. It's like, well, you can bring balance to your mind and your
Hmm.
heart when you practice like the middle pillar exercise. Your energy field balances. So of course then your physical and emotional mental aspects have to also balance. And so I do tend to draw on, I guess, both aspects or these kind of like two worlds, if I want to call it that. And they kind of intersect with each other and inform each other. And also, especially with like, the plant medicine work, I feel grateful for the nursing background because I think that is especially important. And not everyone should be using psychedelics or plant medicines. There's specific kind of contraindications, whether it's medications or different things to be aware of or our past that could come up. And I feel like coming from like this, what I might say, a conscious or like trauma informed approach that definitely like my nursing side has brought in, that could be really beneficial in
Hmm.
those spaces. Otherwise, I mean, and people they're going out, they're watching documentaries about psychedelics. They're curious. They're ordering them online and just doing it and not really creating like the set and setting. And
Yeah.
I feel like that set and setting draws upon safety of like a clinical sense, but also from a spiritual, dare I say, shamanic, energetic space where we are creating a container that's like sacred for this medicine work to take part and.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
that
yeah,
safety
please
behind it,
say.
because you can have a really bad experience and that could set you back even more,
Yeah,
right?
difficult
Mhm.
journeys, difficult experiences could definitely have a timeline, and then you're like, "Oh, wait, what?"
Yeah. So can you walk
Yeah.
us through a little bit about how that looks like with you then? If you walk through people, like you offer a safe space for psychedelic therapy. Is that what you
Yeah,
would
like,
call it?
so
Yeah.
primary work is, like, people are curious about microdosing. And
Yes.
so, microdosing is like taking like a suboptimal amount, like a very low amount, usually of like mushrooms, like psilocybin mushrooms. So people can like microdose with LSD, acid, cannabis even.
Hmm.
And so usually what happens is people are curious about using this for anxiety or stress, maybe to even reduce their use of like antidepressant or other medications,
Yeah.
to stop using ADHD medications and actually gain some sense of focus and get things done. And so we'll have a bit of like a conversation. What's their intention with using the plant?
Hmm.
And then what does it look like to microdose? What's the schedule that they want to follow? What does the practice of intentional dosing look like?
Right.
Is it, and most people I think are like wanting to kind of open up a more spiritual aspect at this point or find a bit more just intention
Hmm.
in like a conscious way. And so we discuss these things and then we meet every couple of weeks. And in that like container of meeting, and also in the like whole like 3 months or whatever that they decide to sign up, it's like, how is this container adding energy to their life and what changes are happening?
Hmm.
How are they moving towards that goal, so to speak? Or how is it that it seems like we're moving like 10 feet backwards? Life is a cycle. There's rhythm. It's not like this path of like point A to point B.
Yeah.
It's just constantly flowing and moving. And so learning, I feel like the plants really help us to see that. And so that's for the most part, I'd say, where people are curious about diving into the medicine work. When it comes to large dose journeys, obviously that's a bit more of an intensive experience
Hmm.
from the place that it's like, 8-hour experience with like support and whatever other sorts of energetic kind of processes need to happen there.
Yeah.
And in this place, we're really, just connecting with that person's intention and also facing whatever it is that shows up. And usually the shadow shows up
Right.
in plant medicine work. And that's why I think it's so, it's scary, it can be challenging and so
Hmm.
forth, because like we don't want to see those darkest parts of ourselves. We just kept like hiding them and pushing them underneath the carpet.
Yeah.
And yet here now with the proper tools and preparation, we're able to use breath, use the energy work, do whatever it takes to like be with what shows up and
Right.
to start to have compassion, see it through the different lens which the plants give us.
Hmm.
And then post that, the integration is like a huge part of like, well, what showed up,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, the difficult experiences. It's not like everything after a journey is going to be rainbows and sunshine and an awesomeness.
Hmm.
Things in your life will show up, just like during therapy. It's
Yeah.
like
It's
people
the
think I
same
go talk
thing.
to a therapist, everything's going to be great. It's like I tell people, as soon as you call me for a session, like therapy session or any work, it's like notice what's coming up.
Hmm.
And if you're feeling resistance to even showing up for your first or second or whatever many sessions, like just recognize it. Let's name it, because it's work. It
Right.
requires us to
Yes.
face it. Hmm.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing with any mental health is you do have to be your own advocate and you do have to do the work. Like you said, medication is a band-aid. And I find, yeah, if you don't kind of work through, that's the one thing with therapy, traditional therapy too. I have always got a little frustrated with like, what is the work I'm supposed to do when I get home? It doesn't seem sometimes like there's a lot of follow up, and I've had really good experiences too. But where somebody maybe isn't with the right people in their therapy sessions and being guided to, do practicing of certain things. And I think it's getting a little bit better, but I like the way that sounds. It sounds like you are giving that foresight to feel what's coming, because it could be deep. It could be deep for the next couple weeks, it might bring up a lot of stuff.
Yeah, especially when folks share that they've come from a lot of trauma in their background, and it's been like a feeling of like stuckness. Like I kind of see like, well, they're like stuck. We get stuck in the box of life. And we're like pushing against the walls of the container, and something once, and that's uncomfortable. It's like we have to kind of like expand out of that, like otherwise, and that involves a bunch of different factors, I guess, to create that change. And it's not all easy, but it is possible.
Right. So have you noticed, like, how long have you been practicing in this side of it?
In like the plant medicine world, so to speak,
and just even the magic and all the, if you want to call it woo-woo, but I don't know if that's a right term for it or not. But
yeah. Well, you know what? Like when I was even in university, I was on for whatever reason. Maybe because I lived in the Middle East. It was very, like a Muslim country. There was like nothing. And going to university, I was like, what? Like there's things like drugs. I didn't really use that many drugs that were like illegal drugs. I was more curious for whatever reason, stupidity probably, in like the legal alternatives. Like what were ways in which people could alter their state of mind? And I was like really like quite, I don't call myself a psychonaut. At that point though, I was definitely like an explorer of altered states through any means that like, okay, what would this do? And like, hey, there's this like legally like chemical alternative to this. Like it sounds really dumb.
No, it doesn't, because
like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I was thinking, but that led me to having a variety of experiences. And then it started getting more into like the different plants and what that looked like. But like working with the police, that wasn't really, so I felt, for me, what I felt throughout a lot of my life was this like, I am over here wanting to be one person, and then I'm here in like my regular world life, pretending to be someone else. And there was such a disconnect.
Right.
And so like I had to put a lot of that stuff on hold. Like, and I guess what I did, less than like not so much practicing or exploring those like states because of my work, like that would not be an ideal sort of combination.
Right.
It was more, okay, how do I learn through, like I mentioned, some of these teachers and people who were talking about altered states. And that led to just like a period of study until I was done. I finally decided to like leave the police. There was, like the systems and all these things were happening. I'm like, this is not me. Like, what? Like we would go
just
in
feel
and,
it.
Yeah, and especially like, especially folks with like major alcohol abuse issues, we'd go in and there would be nothing that we could do. They weren't in the place to want to go for treatment, and, it's in their time. And I was just thinking of like, well, I tell my like police partner, other police, like, well, did you know that like they used to use LSD to like basically treat alcoholism? And that was in Saskatchewan, Weymouth, Saskatchewan. It was a treatment that was approved by the government and used for a long time, like mid 1900s, right? And so, and their responses would be like, oh, it's like, okay, I can't be within a system that's not forward thinking.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of was why I moved on and started to feel more confident and comfortable in my own self-exploration and tuning into, I guess, my authentic self through sharing and practicing different types of magical things. So the last like 2-3 years for sure has been like a deep dive for me. I've like left the healthcare system. I've been doing my own thing and like just really exploring the things that interest me like, around these different topics. And
and that takes a lot of courage, to kind of move out of something that's so I guess familiar and safe. It's a safe place to be. You've got a paycheck coming in, that you're in a system and all that stuff. So to take that leap and, kind of go out on your own a little bit, can you give some advice to especially other women as to how that experience itself has been, and, some strength to somebody that's maybe thinking about that and how they can make that leap?
Yeah. Well, and I think like the huge part that I learned was it's all just an illusion. The sense of stability and safety and whatever, like huge ones I would hear is like, well, you can't leave. Like, what about your health benefits? What about like your pension? What about this and that?
Mm-hmm.
And these are stories like so many people I've talked to who have been in the place of wanting to leave like a corporate job or the like system sort of like set work, or people who have since left. It's like that story of like, oh my gosh, your benefits. It's like, well, all I had to do was call Blue Cross and get my benefits transferred, and I just pay for it out of pocket,
Which you
which I
do
technically would
anyways.
pay anyway. Like,
That's
yeah,
right.
it's just you don't
I
see
know.
it.
It's funny, isn't it?
And yeah, and so things like that. And another part of the safety piece for me, I know everyone's work is so different. What I've definitely kind of overcome the past few months was a sense of like addiction to chaos.
Right.
And,
Yes.
the work that I was doing with crisis team is definitely like it's crisis. It's like high pace. I know that's not everyone's job. And yet I think in everyone's workplace there are dynamics of relationships like that they witness with their colleagues that instill that common sense of chaos and drama and trauma that we are so used to from our childhood.
Yeah.
And so it's like as the healing work takes place and we start to recognize like, and I had some pretty traumatic things happen, like witnessing overdoses, not even to our clients, just people in the back alley. Like that was the last one that like left me literally going through like a trauma response at work with no support from my colleagues because they were literally just dissociated.
Yes.
And I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we're supposed to be here for each other. Why am I even dealing with this like situation? It's not even on the property of our like space yet. Here I am. And that was like, there's so many things tied to my past experiences working in like the supervised consumption sites and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, it was like, okay, I'm done. I can't be in this drama, chaos. I need peace. And I think the nervous system, our souls are like calling for that ease. And that's why maybe they'll pull away from these environments of like working 9 to 5 or whatever the case may be. And that's not everybody's situation, obviously. So I think though, if there's like an inner calling to create something more, and you can do so and like start to trust, and I said before, like the surrender piece. I think it's really an experiment. It really is an experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there, so in that, how your experience then from moving from that, you went into, okay, I'm just done. I can't do this anymore. How did you find the transition once you did make that change? Scary. All the things,
Yeah.
probably.
And it was like a gradual transition. I think, people think it has to be like one or nothing. Like first I was working full time. I was an educator. So kind of in like a middle management, like leadership position, and then what was actually happening at that point is there was just so much stress, and I was wanting to support all the staff and, the management. It didn't seem like, because there were the changes happening, they had to go with what was being said. It just felt like really like a lost cause, so to speak.
Yeah.
And my physical body started showing symptoms. Like I was getting physically unwell. And that decision's like, are you going to die at this job? Like,
Right.
so I was like, okay, you got to step down. You can't be the savior for everyone. No need to be a martyr here. And so I switched from like that full-time work to like part-time, like casual work. And I did that for, I'm going to say maybe 2 years. And then it was around the time, the thing that really pushed me out, I guess, or like got me to jump.
Yeah.
Was it's interesting, the mindset frame, right? Like it was my choice with the pandemic. And at that time I was working also casually with an injection clinic. And a lot of the, not to make this political on your podcast.
It's okay though, because it's totally okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and so what happened was, during that like time of the vaccines, I was working at this injection clinic where I'm giving people antipsychotic medication injections. Most of these people are on a community treatment order, we call it, so they have no choice. And they have to get it, otherwise they call the police. They send out police to go and get them, take them to the hospital. They're either admitted or they're given the injection. And most times it's just a coercement to get the injection. And I had a lot of people in my life being like, well, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, like, no one should tell us what to do with our bodies and and it was kind of like this really intense, like I had a moral injury was what was happening of like, how can we be saying don't do things to our bodies when like since psychiatry's dawn, they've been forcing people to get medication injections or, that like what I was seeing and the thing that really hit me was people getting to the point of like, they weren't even themselves. They were like zombies on some of this medication. They were having suicidal thoughts, they were like shared with me like, and I could see a decline over the months. Some of them, got better. They didn't have so many like perceptual disturbances or paranoia, but it like did something to the soul, to like the spark of passion. And so that led to me being like, I don't care about the vaccine, what people want to do, like make it your own choice. But like, I can't be backing like harmful behavior towards others, with this medication that we're like forcefully, dare I say forcefully, giving people.
In a
So
lot
that
of
was
ways.
kind of why I left.
Yeah, and I think that because it's kind of indoctrinated in us to know that, okay, well, this is what you need to take. But when you look at the side effects of all of those things, it's amazing to me that we aren't more open to other alternative things that, okay, well, you're scared of perhaps microdosing or, I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but the resistance to try something totally different when you're really, like the experiment really has been a lot of medications that are being, were experimented on. I guess I just said that twice, but you know what I mean? Because I'm at a point right now myself. It's like I'm on RTMS therapy. I don't know if I'm sure you've, and the medication. It's hoping that might help, and switch medications and stuff. And again, I'm not anti-medication, but you come to a point where you've experienced all of these things and the suicidal ideation comes in with certain medications. The anxiety even gets worse with some, the brain fog, that feeling of being a zombie. And you kind of get led towards, well, what happens if I just try to go without for now or try something else, something alternative? And I think when those things keep popping up in your mind, you kind of got to trust your gut on that.
Yeah, it's
like we know our
intuitively
bodies.
arising.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like what you say, it's because it's not for everyone. It's like, but the personal self knows and has to sometimes go against, even like doctors or like other people, like family members who are like, oh no, you should. And what I've noticed too is with people who have like done the microdosing practice and have stopped antidepressants or weaned off antidepressants, like there's a period of time that is definitely very uncomfortable. And I went cold turkey off antidepressants. Like it was Zoloft. Horrible experience.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I've done that before too.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, right? Like, and it like leaves you in this state of like, oh, like it's just not.
It's horrible.
Ideal, and yet like sometimes these things happen.
And it's scary when you see how much your mind has been changed by those things. And it's, again, I don't say it's not okay. And lots of people need medication, and it might be something personally I'll need always something, but the getting off that's where I kind of love the safe space that you've brought to people, that you could slowly ease them out of it and then look at it in a practical sense. You also have to be open to, talking to your family and to your close friends or whoever's you're close to, and asking them, how do you see me? Where am I at in your eyes? Because you can feel it inside yourself, but your behaviors and your changes are like your loved ones really do notice that. And just being open to those conversations and being honest. Okay, this is where my journey is right now. I'm slowly weaning off, or I've changed medications, or I'm trying this new therapy. Can you tell me, am I acting strange? Am I short-tempered? Am I all these things, right?
Yeah, and that I like that, Carrie, because I'm thinking about the most recent person who kind of just finished the one program like And from like the beginning to the end, complete day and night, like in terms of their presentation. Whereas before, like just the emotional distraughtness, the anxiety throughout, like the beginning portion to finally at the end. This, I'd say that's been for like over a year, this energy since, but yet at the conclusion, to witness this individual just grounded, having a conversation, present and like aware of what's showing up, like, and it's not about like, oh, good, they're not emotional. That's great. It's more like they were like so aware and just like finally at this place of comfort. And for me to be able to say that to them, like to have that other person, whoever it is, and if it's your doctor, your healthcare professionals, your friends or family, like a therapist, to be able to say like, oh, actually like this, that can be a really powerful reminder of like, okay, like things are working. And I know for me in the start of the spiritual emergence, like I thought I was going nuts. I would look out the window and I'm like, oh my gosh, the world's gonna end. Like I could feel this impending doom. I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
And I'd have this friend who like had come into my life. She'd just send me these messages like and these articles to like stuff about like spiritual awakening symptoms. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, that's what you're going through. Like, calm down. And that was like such a huge, like, that's why I think I didn't spiral into like complete chaos. Because we need that, again, community and connection with people that we trust.
Yeah. And that's what talking about this does, and just opening up about it. Like the fact, even just you saying that out loud about your experience with that, looking outside, I can relate completely. And it's, that impending doom. I'm 2 years sober. I talk about this a lot on my podcast, and I drink, and that's kind of what got me to stop. It was nothing like a major event that all of a sudden said you should stop drinking. It was that impending doom. I'd wake up every day with this feeling, and I still get that now, and this year's been particularly hard. But that's like the spiritual awakening side of it, because certain things are coming to light now that I wouldn't have seen in my darkest time. It's like
cool.
Yeah. So I thank you for putting it that way. It's very relatable, probably to a lot of, especially women. And I say women because we are a little bit more in touch with, or a little bit more open to that kind of thinking. Anyway, that I've experienced. I think we need to get men on board with it, and it's happening, I think. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the masculine and feminine, like for women or those who are kind of operate in a more feminine energy, it's about that intuitiveness. I think for like the masculine has been pretty like toxic masculinity, and so it's like the macho, like tune off and all the connection to intuition or to the feminine, to the point of even harm the feminine, within themselves and also external.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's shifting. More men are taking part in different healing practices and doing their own personal work and being vulnerable, and this, I think it's going to be even more support for the feminine in like their relationships with men, or, because again, like it doesn't matter if they're man or woman, everyone has feminine and masculine energies, but we're like come to a place of more balance. I think too, for the feminine, we're not just like emotionally like, oh, it's like we also are tuning into our masculinity in a more positive way, where we're able to be like the warrior when it's necessary.
And the warrior in the sense, and I just had like a kind of a light bulb moment with the masculine side of us as women. It can often be very toxic too, because we think we have to present ourselves a certain way when we're trying to stand in our power. And so that's a lot of, right? How do you, do you work on a lot of that stuff then? Is that kind of...
yeah, I think that's like a natural progression too, but for myself, I would say like I definitely was in like my toxic masculinity. I was married before, and then like during the spiritual emergence, that kind of like led to like all changes and like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with their life? And then I was divorced. And even in like the relationship following that marriage, it was definitely me being in toxic masculinity. And just like wanting to prove things and like overachieving, overworking. I feel as though this past year I've definitely shifted, you know, the way like constantly, it's constant work. And so I like check in like, okay, I'm like, you know, I'm in my masculine too much here. I'll tell my partner, like, I need to consciously step back and let him take like on certain roles, because I can see how that probably didn't really benefit my marriage, you know, to be the one to do everything, which again, it's like we're encouraged to, and then we do it. And then that's why, you know, the masculine seems so much more like effeminate, because we haven't really given them the chance to step into their power, or their mothers didn't give them the chance to step into their power.
Right.
And yeah, so it's a constant work. And I feel like that's part of bringing the healing and the balance to our lives. So it definitely shows up.
So do you have a lot of male clients, or do you primarily work with women?
Ooh, I would say it's a mix of both. Yeah,
That's
I
good.
would say it's a mix. So, I would definitely say like the masculine, like the men that have come tend to be a bit more like closed in a way, you know, initially, like, and yet like I've had it where people reach out and they're, you know, they're like, oh no, like this is not for me. So I was like, I saw, you know, crystals on your website. And I'm like, crystals? I don't think I have crystals on that. Like, I'm not that type of person.
Right.
Am I? Like, no judgments. But like, I don't feel like I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
And anyways, and then like 2 years later, like somehow full circle person finds me again. And like at that point it was just a different perspective that they held, and it continued to evolve as we like did the work, you know? So I'd say it's a mix of both. You know, maybe it is. I think men can experience different types of healing when they're with men, you know, in men's circles or with masculine healers, you know, and same for women. You know, I would say one of the most powerful healers I've gone to was a masculine, and that really shook a lot of things for me around codependency at the time. You know, it's like I needed that masculine container for me to like, and that probably too would have been parts of where like things started to change with my masculinity, you know, because it was after that relationship had ended with that person.
Aware that you had, and that's the thing, is you have to, it takes two to tango is the old saying, and we've all got our own things that we're going through and dealing with, and to take, you know, notice of what part did we play in that relationship or that moment. Right? But to be able to be, I think that that's important though, if you've ever had trust issues with men, or there's been bad abusive relationships or anything like that, to be able to, again, in a safe space, have somebody that's leading that comes from the masculine side, that kind of brings back that trust that you can see, that, you know, men are very sensitive too. And I have 3 sons. So, you know, you think, oh, I hope I did okay. I was a single mom. So it's like, did I make them too, you know, this and that, you overthink it, but it is what it is. And just being open to those changes. Is that on your side? I had that the other day too.
They literally like turned down the street.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
That's a sign for you. You're doing a good job. You have the support of spirit.
There you go.
With raising, 3 boys. Wow, that would be like a whole other level, you know. And yet everyone has to like go through their own journey.
That's right.
I try to remind myself as a mom, like, you know, it doesn't matter what I do or don't do. Like, just do the best that you can. It's a healing process again for our inner child and parenting, to break the patterns of like the family that's maybe not the best sort of behaviors or ways of parenting or being in family relationship.
Yeah.
And then like,
and understanding that those relationships, you know, even that, like, I've talked to so many people too, and if you learn the history of maybe where your parents came from, where your grandparents came from, they weren't set up for success right from the get-go. So, you know, certain patterns that they had, this is where you can start to, you know, make that change and break that cycle. But like you said, I like that 8, how many, what did you say, 8 generations?
Oh, the 8 generations
okay.
back. Yeah. And like, you know, some of the like really most profound experiences I had, actually that was another time I met Sherry Lynn.
Okay.
Sherry Lynn, we took another like the color sound healing
Ah, yes.
course with our Reiki teacher. Oh, there's more people coming.
Oh, here we go.
I pause. Oh, they shut it off.
Edit it out. Yeah.
And anyways, so this course, I was drawn to it. I wanted to do it. I'm like sound healing and stuff. And I was like, well, I probably shouldn't spend the money. And then I was like, oh, and the time won't work. Like, I feel like I'm doing too many classes right now. I just need to say no.
Mhm.
But like our teacher was like, well, Sheridan was like, you should take it. Like, do it. And
Mhm.
then the teacher's like, well, yeah, like I'll switch the time. Like, when do you want to do it? And they were both so flexible. And she made all these other like adjustments for me, like, you know, financially even, because I was just like, I don't know, like, it's like, I think we just maybe finished our level 2
Right.
Reiki. Anyway, so here I'm like, okay, well, this is strange. I must need to take this class. So like, that's to me like the universe saying, like, do it.
Yeah.
So I signed up. We're learning. And then Sherry Lynn's about to practice on me because it's just the two of us in the class. And I laid down and I had this like intense fear. I like shot and I was like, I don't want it. I'm like, and the teacher had to come and be like, okay, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I just don't want the session. Anyway, so she did it. It was lovely. And the next morning I like woke up with this major like realization about like my family line from like 3 generations, on my dad's side, some stuff that had happened with like our family name and all these change. Like I knew all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I was able to confirm it with my dad.
Right.
And it was like this major healing. And to me, that's like the ancestral shamanic work. When we allow ourselves to be open to these experiences, stuff literally shifts in our DNA. That's why I think sound is really powerful. The vibration goes into the cells
Mhm.
where our DNA is. And that DNA is carried through our bloodline. And so it can ripple through forward and back in time and like impact this like major like realizations or insights and changes in our life. And so like, yeah, I just feel like this stuff is so powerful. So I use the drum a lot, or
Oh,
like
I
these
love
different
it.
tuning forks and sound instruments. My partner and I host like sound healing events that are a
Okay.
little less conventional.
Yeah.
Just because the vibration, the frequency can be so supportive
Mhm.
for healing.
That's actually
Yeah.
one of the drum. I have a friend that she does the bowls and but the drum is what always gets me, and I go into such a hypnotic state almost from the drum. It's almost like it brings out this, I don't even know, like a deep connection to more than what we're at, and maybe that sounds silly, but it just really like connects me to whatever it is that I need to get to.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
grounding, it's body. And I
Yeah.
think this is like the evolution we're going through. I tell you know, like we've been up here with the head, with our
Mhm.
analytical mind, but also like the traditions of the past, like the, you know, Eastern traditions, Buddhism, everything was about focusing on the crown, the third eye chakra. And now we're like gradually making our way down, and we've been in this heart space. We're talking about emotion. You know, there's Heart Math Institute, all these different like scientists studying about heart cohesiveness or whatever they call it,
Mhm.
you know, and how that can help heal. Is that we're not, that's only halfway. Like the shamanic ancestral, the drum, the body needs to be awoken. And the plants help with this too, because it connects us to the earth. And so
Mhm.
what you're describing is exactly that, going down to the root, the sacral, being in that like very like dark movement and like connected place, which is also our ancestor. To be take time, I guess, but that I think is ultimately what people are really craving, so that we
Mhm.
can like complete this cycle through the chakras or the energy
Mhm.
centers
Ooh, I
and
love the way you put that.
have both above and below.
Right. Yeah, and it is because I feel like like most of the people I've met, I mean, we're all in a different place for healing, and but I feel like there's this merging of things going on right now.
Mhm.
I don't know, do you feel that
Mhm.
energy?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. It's like finding our way of like the two becoming one. And
Yeah.
this is very much the spiritual and the material worlds joining. And we all have
Mhm.
different ways in which we find that or connect with it.
Yeah.
Like,
I
so
got all
yeah.
the
Ooh,
yeah, I
exciting.
love talking about this stuff. It just makes me feel
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I ask all of my guests this question, but what is the last best thing that you do every night before you go to bed?
The last best thing I do. I guess it depends. I feel like I definitely go through cycles of, I just made a video about like routines and stuff.
Yeah.
Like even in the morning, like I will do my best to have particular practices that I do. And like the one, I guess, at the nighttime, for the most part, that I would say I do, though, like again, cycles where sometimes like, oh, I feel less like motivated to do that, or maybe more motivated. It would be like any type of like magical practice that clears my energy, like the Lesser Banishing Ritual, the pentagram, and like the solar adorations, we call it, where we basically are going to like the 4 different corners throughout the day, but at nighttime you end with the north and the energy of Kefra, where it's like the sun has set and is in its like sleeping point. It's like in its death.
Mhm.
And to me, that just reminds me of like the silence and the stillness, so like the nothing point. And it's like the moment of being like, hey, I can now reset. And then I set my intention for bed, because part of shamanism is definitely the power of the dream time. And we're in our wake dream now, and we're in our sleep dream, and we sleep at night. And so we can use the dream time by simply just stating, what is it? Do we have questions that we want the answers to? Is there something that we're working on that we need some guidance? Or kind of,
Mhm.
I'll just speak that to myself as I lay in bed and pray, and then like let it kind of go and see
Right.
what happens in the dream.
Right. And clear
Mm-hmm.
that energy from the day and move forward into the dream in its new space, I guess.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Like a
And so are
reset.
you one that when you wake up in the morning, do you remember a lot of your dreams? Do you try
Yeah,
to
I would
analyze
say
them?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I'll write them down. I'll like kind of review them. Um, I find the a helpful one is to talk with others about it. So like my partner and my kid will talk. Like I think that's a huge, because most people say, "Oh, I don't remember dreams." Like everyone's dreaming. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of starting. And what I would recommend is like the thing that maybe helped me to really develop that is when I wake up, I have the journal beside me, and I will like, or wherever, if I go to another room to write, if my partner's still sleeping,
Mhm.
as like just start with like the feeling or the one thing, the one symbol that you remember from a dream. Like it's like, oh, I remember there was like a palm tree. Like just write out, and then from there, free association, and more stuff will come. It's not even about remembering the dream, it's about like the energy in which that sparks in the daytime.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I would say I do more so. And usually like, yeah, ideas or realizations come through.
Yeah, once
Mm-hmm.
you see it down on paper and you see that, okay, this is where that's when you can start to kind of dive into it a little bit, or even just, it's just out there now and it's something to resonate with you for a bit and, see where that dream takes you, I suppose. And if oftentimes you look back and it's like, I remember, I get very strong deja vu. I don't know what
Oh
your
yeah.
your thoughts are on that. I always find that so fascinating. What's your theory on deja vu? What's your perspective?
Ooh.
Do you have one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there's different types of deja vu or something, is like how I experience it. I don't know if that's something you noticed. Like there's like
Mhm.
really intense, like where it's just like, oh, like I remember this happening before. And then there's like the deja vu of like, oh, I've actually been here before, or I've
Mhm.
dreamt this before. Like those are like, it's almost like 3 different layers is how I would feel like. And the last 2 can be like way more intense, where it like really like throws me off for a moment. And I'm like, what is this? And then like, and it's almost as if I'm playing out in my mind or attempting to create what the next pieces are.
Yes.
Like, does that make
Oh,
sense? Like,
1,000%. That's exactly how I would describe it. And my grandma, I used to get, I was very close with my grandma, and I had the most deja vu when I was with her. But
oh, interesting.
wow, you just explained it perfectly, because that's, yeah, there's the ones where I know I've dreamt it, I've experienced
Mm-hmm.
it in my sleep, and you want to play it out. You want to predict what's going to happen next. And that's impossible, really. I don't know if it's impossible, but yeah, but sometimes you'll sit there like, oh my God, it's happening. It's still happening. I
Yeah.
dreamt this too. Wow. And it kind of blows you away. Like, yeah, it's pretty
Yeah. It's
amazing. I
like
find it amazing.
weird.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, and when we think about it from like, yeah, shamanic, magical perspective, like everything happens kind of in the astral realm. So, like our minds create our reality, and there's this like the thought becomes form. And so whether or not in that moment it's like we're just so tuned in to what's about to happen that it feels like it's happening already. Like, and the only other time I've had that outside of like that deja vu is like during an LSD experience where it was like, I'm like, I know exactly what's happening. Even
Yeah.
though I should have no idea what's happening.
Mhm.
But like there's like a stream of consciousness that we're riding, and it becomes like it's
It's
just it is.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know. It's an
fascinating.
uncomfortable feeling,
It
but like it's
is.
also really cool.
I love talking about it, and I love to hear everybody's perspective on that one because everybody has a
Hmm.
bit of a different theory on it. Like it's like your mind's moving too fast, and it's like it's fast forwarding and then rewinding. Like it's an
Yeah.
actual thing that happens, and I don't know that I believe that. I think it's more because I do believe in a higher self and higher powers, whatever it is, and the energy behind it. So I feel like that it happens for a reason at certain times. That's just my belief on deja vu.
And was your grandma like very intuitive, or what would you say you described her as? I'm curious.
Because of where, you didn't really talk about that a lot, but I would say she was, yeah, like she was just a special soul, and she had an energy about her, but it wasn't something that we really talked about. It wasn't something that in our family, she'd say, "Oh, I, you know, have this spiritual side about her," but she does. And I know she comes back to me. She comes back to me in the form of a robin, and it
Cool.
happens quite a bit. And I don't know. That's a good question because I'd love to know now because we could talk about anything, and I'd love to know what she would think of what's happening right now. I mean, other than what's happening
Mm.
in the world, she'd be like, "I can't believe this is happening right now." But um, just to hear her perspective on it would be, I'd be fascinated to know it. She hides things on me too, I think. Now I sound crazy, but she's around.
Oh, I think that's good. So yeah, the medicine science, animals and all that,
Yeah.
like spirit can speak through.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's like we'll like ask the robin, like
Mm-hmm.
next time you can have the conversations with nature, and it will like communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it sounds silly or
It
weird,
does
and
when you say
yet
it out
like
loud, but
that's what people have done since the beginning of time. And it might not even be through like a voice communication, though sometimes there's like an inner like hearing
mhm.
that happens. It's more like can be then like the actions or the behaviors of the nature around that starts to communicate some message. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Like most of what she has to say, what is still sharing with you,
Oh,
you
she
know?
has a lot to say, I think. She
Hmm.
has a lot of insight that she just maybe didn't have a chance to say while she was here. And I think that's part of it. Like the guidance, if you can think of that, I know that she's with me still, and that's the only thing that gives me peace. And
Hmm.
yeah. Anyway, if it
Beautiful.
this is okay, so this has been awesome. I just want to know if you could leave the listeners with just some advice, or not advice, that's always the wrong, but something that really comes to you that you would like to share that gives some positive, um, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Oh yeah. I guess like the main thing I would say is just like really aligning with like your personal truth. Like what does that mean? Like what's true to you, and any places where people or like societal programs have said, no, like that's not for you, even though something internal feels like, well, yeah, that like just feels and seems to be right. Like to go for it. Um but there's oftentimes like a lot of resistance right when we're about to make any changes, a lot of fear. The ego works in a variety of ways: fear, stories that wants to like keep us small. And when we can go up to that and like face it and make it like our friend, that's when we can start to see, yeah, the shifts that really align, and like that becomes an ally.
Hmm.
And like the magic can really open up because we all have magic. We all are magic, and we can do magic. be the magic in the world, however one wants to identify
Mm-hmm.
it. And like, yeah, I just hope that that can be an encouragement to people to continue to create
Yeah.
whatever it is they feel called to create.
Mm-hmm. And create and love and all those things go into the same, it really comes down to all of that. And I think that was beautifully said and great advice. Okay, where can people find you? Where, your Instagram and your website and all of the stuff?
Oh yeah, so YouTube, we have like live videos every week where we do like other types of like intuitive guidance, card pulls, and other fun intuitive things.
Mm-hmm.
Also some magical stuff, and so that's Deep Mind Squared. And that's also my website, deepmindsquared.com. Then we have a list of events that we host here in the city of Edmonton, kind of a mix of things online and also in person. And then on Instagram, I think it's deep_mind_square.
Mm-hmm.
People can follow on there. Though I definitely say YouTube is kind of primarily where I'm focusing energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll definitely be heading there to subscribe. And that's the thing is YouTube is such an amazing tool as well that, there's so many things that you can learn from. And like you said, so do you lead meditations and all that? Like, does it come in that form?
Yeah, we have some meditations on there. Also on the Insight Timer app, if you use that,
Oh, yeah.
under the
Yep.
same name. But otherwise, it's like a mix of kind of empowering, intuitively channeled messages and guidance, healing practices, whether it's Reiki sessions or just other kind of energetic processes and rituals and
Mm-hmm.
stuff is kind of,
Yeah.
and then in the membership on YouTube, there's like access to kind of like some more around like Hermetic Kabbalah. It's like a magical sort of perspective, like a map that
Mm-hmm.
works on the tree of life, in which we can explore our consciousness and that of like the world and see kind of the connections there.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely just say check it out if you're curious.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely
Yeah.
curious after that explanation too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
rabbit
that's
holes.
awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Fola. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure to talk to you. It's I feel like I'm probably going to reach out to you here soon and find out more. Thank you for taking the time today to make a difference and to spread, some hope in mental health. And I think it's gonna people are gonna get a lot out of this episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Carrie, and thank you for having me here and everyone listening. Hope you have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you take care. Well, that was another amazing episode. I had so much fun talking to Fola, and I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. She has a really cool perspective on things, and she's just so open and heartfelt. So I hope you get that same feeling out of this episode and give her some follows and shares and all that good stuff. You can also give me a follow on Instagram at carryonwithcarrie_podcast or on Facebook at Carry On With Carrie Podcast. I am on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And, you never know who's going to benefit from this. Please, if you got something out of it, maybe just take the time to share. You never know. Let's just help one person at a time.